So we are heading towards our next expert talk. The title of our next talk is Statistical Learning Application of Principal Component Analysis in the Compositional Design of Bulk Metallic Glasses, which will be presented by our respected Sir Dr. Manvin Kumar Tripathi from Department of Metallurgical and Materials Engineering, National Institute of Technology, Raipur. Welcome on behalf of organizing committee, our institute and AICT. I welcome you, sir. Sir has joined with us. Good afternoon, Manan sir.
Uh, good afternoon, Miss Swati.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah.
Uh, so, for our participants, the Dr. Manvin Kumar
Can
Tripathi.
you
Yes, sir.
can
You're
you please
audible.
confirm that my screen is visible to you? My
Uh,
screen is visible to you,
so, your presentation is not visible to us.
right?
Yes, sir. It's presenting. It's showing presenting. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So can you see my screen, Swati?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's clearly visible, sir.
So would you would you permit me to start now?
No, sir. Just a small introduction of yours for our participants. Please wait for 2
Sure.
minutes. Okay. So, participants, I just want to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Manu Tripathi, sir. Sir has obtained his Bachelor of Technology degree from the National Institute of Technology, Rourkela. He worked on the tensile texture and the low cycle fatigue behavior of TI metal 834 during his Master of Technology dissertation at the Indian Institute of Technology, Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi, UP. He has extensive knowledge on the data-driven models of bulk metallic glasses and related experimental techniques in the synthesis and characterization of amorphous alloys, an active area of research which he pursued during his doctoral research work at the Indian Institute of Engineering, Science and Technology, Shibpur, Havana. He has delivered many invited lectures on the subject at the international conferences organized by institutes including IIT Madras and IIT Kharagpur. He has worked in various administrative capacities, including the head of the department at the Department of Metallurgical and Materials Engineering, National Institute of Technology, Raipur, Chhattisgarh. His current research interest includes material designing using ab initio calculation for energy storage and thermochemical fuel production and ultra clean steels. We are really privileged to have you, sir, and we are waiting to hear from your side. Once again, on behalf of organizing committee, I welcome you, sir. Now,
Thank you, Swati. Thank you, Swati. Could you please confirm that my slides are visible and it is clearly audible to
yes,
you?
sir, your voice is audible. Your first slide is showing to us. So, can you please?
Okay, sure. So
Yes, sir.
yeah, so let me go to the next
Yes, sir.
slide. Whether
Yes,
you
sir.
can
Yes,
see
sir.
my next
Yes,
slide,
sir. Yes, sir.
yes. So at the outset, I should a very good afternoon to all the organizing committee members and all the faculty members who are participating in this faculty development program and all the young researchers. I would begin with congratulating the organizing team, especially Dr. Verma sir and Dr. Keshav sir, Swati and the entire team for organizing such a wonderful faculty development program. And I don't hesitate to say that I was interested attending this program, complete this program. Rather delivering a lecture, I was more inclined to attend this program. But due to my other prior commitments, I could not do it. But thanks to the computer technology and the video or possibility of recording these lectures, I could follow the lecture by Professor Mrinalini Deshpande madam. And I assume with that lecture that mainly the lectures are delivered on ab initio modeling, which you understand that we try to calculate the energy and force as precise as we can do, right? And we use it for technological applications, right? But this presentation is in contrast with the physical model based or ab initio modeling based presentation. And I should not say that it is in contrast with, rather than it complements and it supplements the ab initio techniques. And I have seen many applications. All the techniques, they have certain strength and certain limitations. And if you combine two techniques, then it become a really powerful technique. So many research papers I have noted that people, they are using ab initio techniques and so-called statistical learning based or data driven modeling based techniques. So the theme of this faculty development program is on materials modeling. So we are going to take up a case study which is obviously related to materials, but the application area is slightly different from the electronic devices. But whenever we are going for any modeling activity, so there are certain input variables and certain target properties which we want to achieve, and we want to correlate between them, and we want to develop the technology. That is the basic thing, irrespective of the area in which you are working. So hopefully this technique will help you to supplement your ab initio modeling based technique. So we are going to study so-called statistical learning. So why do we call it statistical learning? Hopefully by the end of this lecture we will be able to appreciate it. And I know that maybe this principal component analysis, that may be a new word which comes from statistics itself. And metallic glasses or bulk metallic glasses also I will introduce, and what is the challenge and why do we need to design its composition and for what purpose we need to design it. So to begin with, I'm going to say that there is something called popular theme, which is data driven materials modeling, and it is applicable where the problems are complex and the constitutive relations either cannot be derived or are too approximate for practical quantitative use. And the second point is that so what is the philosophy of data driven models? I think that this is something very important, crucial to pick it up before we proceed ahead, that it derives useful constitutive relations from the data developed on the basis of physics of the subject rather than from the basic laws of the physics. There is slight difference. Means here also, when we are trying to do modeling, we want to develop the constitutive relationship between input and output variable, right? And we are taking help of the basis of the physics, but we are not very strict to the basic laws of the physics. That is the fundamental difference between data-driven model and your ab initio modeling approach. And it offers the possibility of making quantitative predictions. So you have already attended so many excellent lectures in this faculty development program. So I need not to, there is no point to emphasize or overemphasize the requirement of the prediction, why we need predictions basically. And it should not be, qualitative rather than it should be quantitative. That will help us to take the technology and design the material. And the data driven materials modeling, it is going to offer you the quantitative prediction techniques. And next, sometimes we use a new subject which is picking up gradually, which is called materials informatics. So the heading of my next slide is informatics in materials design. So I guess that all our participants, they are interested in materials design. The route may be different, right? So and these data driven models or data mining techniques or materials informatics, sometimes it is used interchangeably, right? So the design based on, so what people have been doing in the traditional materials engineering is that they are using their own knowledge or experience, and they are going for informed trial and error, right? I'm not saying that they are just doing trial and error. It is informed trial and error, and then that information is coming from the knowledge of the researcher, okay? But the problem is that it is being done in the restricted space of composition and processing conditions. Basically, in materials, we deal with composition, and there are various processing conditions, and I'm trying to generalize it, right? It is a very wide field, right? So, but you know that a person who is trying to develop a material, he or she is limited by his own experience, right? Now, and it is essentially what he is doing is that person, that researcher is doing that we can call human data mining. But if this work of human data mining, if it is being transferred, right, transferring the data mining task from human mind to computer, and that is being done. Why? Because nowadays we have powerful computers, and what these computers can do, they can bring better accuracy, and they can handle more data, right? And I will give you example, right? We are going to take up a case study, and I'll talk about that. What does it mean that handling large number of data, and what human mind will not be able to will not be capable to deal with such a large data, but computers can do it, and the powerful computers can easily do it. So we try to derive relationship between the desired dependent variable, which we want to achieve, target variable or variables, with independent variables, right? And that can be measured and controlled. The independent variables which you can measure and control. And if you have the interrelationship between the independent variable and dependent variable, so your materials development task becomes easy for you, right? And the dependent variables can be quickly predicted. And the focus here is on prediction, means from the independent ones. What is the motivation doing it? You want consuming experiments, right? I cannot say, it will be wrong to say that we don't want to do experiment, right? Without experiment, you cannot say that what modeling you have done, it is reliable. So we have to do experiment, but if we can reduce, because it is time consuming and it is costly, right? So with this introduction, we are going to talk about, like to present a case study of compositional dependence. We want to do generic prediction of compositional dependence of so-called transforming of alloys. So the physicists who are not very well aware about alloys, then I should say that there is something called pure elements, right? And long back, maybe hundreds or maybe 1,000 years before, it was noted that when you are going to put two elements together, they are going to form alloys, right? It is using the word mixture is not correct, but that mixture is at atomic scale, and that we call alloy, and it offers various good properties. So nowadays in market we use a lot of alloys and we rarely use pure metals, right? So combination of two elements or more than two elements, that is the alloy. That is a primary introduction about the alloys, right? And here in this case study, we are going to see that people have attempted to put 8 elements together, right? They have gone, means starting from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, they have gone up to 8 elements, and even you can increase further, right? But in literature, we have seen that they have tried to put 8 elements together to achieve the desired property. So which property we are interested in? Say, we'll discuss as this. We are going to proceed ahead. So next is that I should give you an example of metallic glass. So as and when I talk about the metallic glasses, I face immediate question that whether this metallic glasses are transparent. Silicate glass is transparent. So the question is that why do you call it glass, right? Because the glass, if you go by strict definition of glass, they are super cooled liquids. Its structure is liquid structure, and it's super cooled, right? So and it behaves practically as if it is solid, and it is made of metals, okay, or metallic elements, so we call it metallic glass, okay? So how it came in existence, for example, right? And how people came to know about metallic glasses, right? So it was an accidental discovery. So what kind of accident might have happened? Like that people, they knew about the metallic glasses. So for that first accident, it took place in the laboratory of Professor Paul Duwage, and it was in 1960 in California Institute of Technology, US, right? And that experiment was that his PhD scholars, they had molten alloy, and it was suddenly quenched, and somehow they had access of transmission electron microscope, and that they checked what is its structure, how it looks like. So normally, the metals, they have tendency to crystallize. Okay, the atoms, they sit in periodic arrangement and they crystallize, but they were surprised to see that the structure was amorphous structure, right? So this is how initially they did not believe that this structure can be amorphous, and they used to think that there is some experimental error, but once they repeated it many times and it was amorphous, then they had to believe that something has happened, and this is how it started. So obviously the structure of glass is not crystalline, it is amorphous. Okay, and in order so that you can visualize that what actually we are doing, right? So that the experimental synthesis of metallic glass ribbons, right? I'm going to use the word ribbons, and the thickness of this ribbon is, let us say, 40 microns. The thickness comparable to the thickness of the page of your book, notebook, or paper. The thickness of the paper, that is the thickness, about 40 micron or so. So how do we produce it? The reason of the metallic glasses. Here, the experimental arrangement is shown that it is a quartz tube, and in which you are going to put the metallic powders or metals, right? And there is the induction coil over here, and this induction coil, it is capable to melt this metal. Okay, first, and second is that we are going to blow argon gas, and if due to the pressure of the argon gas, this liquid, it is going to fall here on the copper roll. Okay, and since the thermal conductivity of copper is very high, it is going to quench it very fast. I'm using the word quenching, and it is RSP is nothing but rapid solidification processing. Okay, and sometimes we call it quenching or non-equilibrium processing. Different equivalent words are used in materials literature, right? So what is being done is that you are extracting heat very fast. So what is happening fundamentally, that this liquid structure, I'm talking about the structure at atomic level, that is retained, right? And that is called glass formation, basically, right? And I'm not going to go in detail of the science of the glass formation, because it is an involved subject. It will take a lot of time, and we have limitation of time. So what we'll do is that this is how that this liquid, it is transferred in the thin layer of the ribbon first. So why this is happening, why it is solidifying, and the liquid is solidifying, basically, not in crystalline form, but if you examine the structure at atomic level, you find that it is amorphous, basically, right? So that you can make amorphous anything. For example, it depends on the cooling rate, how fast you are going to cool it. For example, you can you can take pure nickel, and if you quench it at very high rate, somehow, let us say 10 power 20 Kelvin per second or so, you can convert the nickel into amorphous structure, right? But that thicker this section will be. For example, if you are going to make this ribbon thick enough, right? So the surface will be cooled very fast, but the core will not cool very fast. So on the surface you will get glass, but inside the core it will become crystalline. So it will not be completely glass. So we good properties, good physical properties, because it is glass. So we are going to see which good physical properties we are going to get, and there is attempt to how to increase this thickness. Right, we want to increase this section thickness, which should be complete glass, and that is about the glass forming ability of this particular material or this particular composition. And it may be pure metal, but normally it is seen that pure metals, it is very difficult to make it amorphous. But if you are going for combination of elements, 2, 3, 4, more the elements, better, higher is the glass forming ability. That has been established in the literature, right? So normally people go for alloys, basically, right? So with this introduction, let us go ahead. There are various applications due to its high strength and excellent corrosion resistance. The excellent corrosion resistance, we get it because of there is no grain boundaries at micron scale. That is why the corrosion resistance is high, and this is the goal for it is used for golf, and it is made of plain golf, and it is made of metallic glasses. This is one of the industrial application this material has got, and it has high hardness, and it has low shrinkage during solidification. Due to that, it is possible to make the gears whose typical dimension is microns, right? So the micron size gears can be made out of the metallic glasses due to that very low shrinkage during the solar deviation properties. It has large elastic elongation limit, and it has good magnetic properties are also there. So these three applications, it is in use, and other applications, forecasted applications, it is shown over here. And I have taken this from Professor Inove's book, who has already contributed 2,500 research papers in field of metallic glasses, right? So the question comes is that need for high GFA compositions, we need alloys which should have high glass forming ability compositions. So why do we need it? That is the question. The answer for this is that the engineering application, they need alloy compositions with large section thickness, right? It is, like we will have very rare or limited application when you give glass to someone whose thickness is in few microns, right? I'll not say that it is totally useless. It can be useful for certain application, but if you have the thick sections, so it can have general applications. For example, here in this image, these are the various rods, okay, which is made of metallic glasses. So the point is that these rods, if you cut it, and you can do the optical microscopy, or you can do transmission electron microscopy. So obviously, that when you are going to quench it, so on surface the cooling rate will be high. So if you cut it and you look here, then on periphery you will get the glasses structure, but it is quite possible that due to low cooling rate at the center, it may crystallize. So there is a concept of critical diameter for a given alloy composition. What is that? The highest diameter you can make out of that composition, so that it should completely crystallize at the center. So it should completely be glass at the center. There should be no crystal. The largest diameter which you can form using the composition at fixed cooling rate. Let us fix the cooling rate first, right? Keeping the cooling rate fixed. Now it becomes the property of the alloy composition itself, and that we call glass forming ability. So different compositions, they can have different glass forming ability, right? And it is measured sometimes in terms of the critical diameter. Higher is the diameter for a given composition, better the glass forming ability of that glass is there. And right, so higher is the cooling rate, the critical section of the thickness, amorphous thickness, will increase, that we understand. But that there is an engineering limit of putting increasing the cooling rate, that we understand. So we should compare various alloys based on keeping the cooling rate fixed, okay? And now there is altogether a new field of compositional design on which this presentation is focused. That as alternative, it is proposed that selecting a composition. So selecting a compositional alloy, what does it mean? You are free to choose elements from the periodic table. The number of elements may be 2, 3, 4. At least it should be 2, and you can increase it. And what should be its atomic fraction, right? And this is called compositional design, basically, right? Elements and corresponding atomic fraction leading to higher critical thickness of the metallic glass. So this is what we can do. Option 1 is to rely on the cooling rate, right? That is the mechanical aspect, but it has the upper limit. And this is the materials aspect, basically, right? Which element we should choose and in which proportion we should choose, so that the glass forming ability of that alloy should be higher, right? So now there are various compositional design methodologies which people have already attempted in last 60 years, because this field started in 1960. So 40 plus 20, it is 60 years is already done. So the very first approach was proximity to eutectic composition. So this is a binary system. Here you are putting composition and temperature, and this kind of phase diagram we call is the eutectic phase diagram. So normally it is noted that any composition, the very first alloy which was made, gold silicon alloy, right? And that composition taken was eutectic composition. So there is a specialty of eutectic composition, that the liquid remains stable at the till lowest temperature, right? So it was noted that if you are going to quench it, then normally it is converted in glass. It does not crystallize, because that at eutectic composition, 2 phases has to separate, alpha and beta. And when you are going to cool it very fast, then there is no sufficient time and temperature right? So that this alpha and beta separation should take place. And once it cannot take place, so it solidifies as metallic glass. So this is one technique, right? So, and it is heavily relied upon till date. Since last 60 years of research, people are still relying on, that they are looking for compositions with the deep eutectic. So there is no problem, that for the binary system, there are many reported phase diagrams. Even you can say that many ternary phase diagrams, three element system phase diagram, which we call ternary phase diagram, they are available. But if you go for 4-component system, it is very difficult to visualize 4-component system. You cannot visualize it. And many 4-component phase diagrams are not available, right? And if you go for higher component system, 5, 6, 7, 8, so we cannot think about, that we can easily predict what is the eutectic composition. So that is why we need for certain techniques in which you can predict it, and we can try whether it has high glass drawing ability. So similarly, the second technique was metallography based techniques. People used to vary the composition and check whether the glass is forming or it is getting crystallized. The third technique was a structural and topological approach. It is basically, that there is a very popular law of alloy formation. We call it Hume-Rothery rules, right? There are 3 rules. It is related. When if you are going for alloy formation, whether it will form a solid solution or it will form something else. It may be compounds or there are various possibilities, right? So this technique was applied. That is called, the structural and topological approach. And one of the approaches is called atomic size distribution plot. This is a typical atomic size distribution plot. Here we are putting the radius, atomic radius, right? And here we are putting the concentration for a typical composition, right? And it is noted that this is a bell-shaped curve, right? And it is inverted down, okay? So it is typically noted that when you are getting this kind of shape, it will have poor glass forming ability, and it is normally noted for iron-based alloys. But if it has just upward shape, something like this, right, it will have good glass forming ability, right? And we need to analyze why it is so, and I'm not explaining that. But this is also attempted. People have tried to design composition based on this so-called atomic size distribution plots, right? So this is also one approach. Third approach is that people have been, looking for the radius ratios, and this is the coordination number, right? As coordination number is increasing, right? So for this particular coordination number, this is the radius ratio. Okay, ratio of the largest radii solute to the radii of the solvent. That ratio, and if that when a composition it is having that radius ratio close to this, it is noted that it has good glass forming ability. That is the third approach. The fourth approach is people have extensively used the thermodynamics, right, to find out the suitable composition. For example, they are trying, in this particular example, they are trying to make copper, titanium, zirconium based alloy, right? And they are putting, the contours over here for the glass forming ability, and they are trying to predict the glass formation. There is another approach called cluster line based approach. This is the copper, zirconium, nickel, aluminum system, and it is E by A ratio, and various lines and planes are drawn, and various compositions people are trying to pick up and try to check whether it has good glass forming ability. Another approach, molecular dynamic simulation, is also tried. People have tried to apply molecular dynamic simulation to capture composition of the good glass forming ability, and density of states based approach people have also used, right? So, but there are, we review all these such techniques, we find common limitations. And what are the common limitations? One is that extreme dependence on the eutectic composition, right? And second is that difficulty while working in multi-component space. So what does it mean, multi-component space? Here we are taking example of four component system or 4 element system, okay? And as I said, that minimum you should have 2 elements, right, for a alloy formation. And people have tried up to 8, based on my knowledge, and that number might have also exceeded. 8 elements simultaneously people they are using. So here we are taking an example that if you are dealing with 4 element system, so, and if you want to boil down to one composition, what you have to do is that somewhere you have to fix, a composition along this line. How much, what proportion of silver and copper you need to put. And once you are going to fix it, so this 3 dimension is going to reduce to the 2 dimension. Now, once you are coming to the 2 dimension, means you have to fix this composition. We are putting it over here. Then what you have to do, you are free to vary your magnesium and yttrium, and if you vary, so what happens is that you have to explore all this composition reason maybe, and people have done it experimentally, and gradually, that they find that if they are moving towards this direction, they are finding crystals, so they have to move in this direction. So gradually they have done a lot of experiments, and they are boiling down to this particular area where they can make metallic glass of 16 diameter. So you can understand that how cumbersome, how many experiments one need to reach to this particular reason. So this is what I mean by difficulty while working in the multi-component space, right? Another limitation is that whether there are guidelines available for design of metallic glasses. The answer is yes. And this kind of guideline is given by Professor A. Inouye, who has already contributed to 2,500 plus research papers in this particular field. So, but the guidelines are qualitative. They are not quantitative. We cannot fix the composition using it. So, having this limitation in mind, there are other limitations that that if somebody is asking that how many metallic glasses are formed and what is the best known critical diameter. So best known critical diameter is 72 mm, and since this is an old image, now it has become 80 mm. 80 mm is 8 centimeter thick metallic glasses people have made, and it is made by Professor Inouye, but it is palladium based, and palladium is very costly, right? If you try to know its cost, maybe for 2 gram palladium we need to spend maybe 30,000 rupees or so. So we can use it for research purpose, but for common engineering purpose, we cannot use palladium, that you can understand. Similarly, if you look for the low cost material, right? So iron based metallic glass, it was found in 2005, and its critical diameter was 18 mm. So people have already been working on the iron based metal. So different elements people have, let us say zirconium based metal. So in 2001 it was discovered that 50 mm thick metallic glass it was, people have discovered, but there is need to work with the metals which are less cost materials, right, and which have good glass flowing ability. So this particular presentation, it is going to focus on that area. Okay, so another limitation is costly elements and rare direct search for compositions in multi-component space for high GFA. So these are, with these limitations, right, there is scope for materials informatics. So it is noted, that glass flowing ability, it is highly sensitive to the composition variation. For example, 0.5% compositional variation in a ternary system, the GFA has changed by 70%. I am referring a PhD thesis to supplement it. That GFA is very much sensitive to composition, first, and second is that how many compositions are possible, right? For example, if you are taking 38 elements, and for binary systems, so you will have so many combinations, 32C2, 3-component system, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and if you sum it, it comes out to be 64 million combinations. So if we try to explore such combinations experimentally, you can assume that how much costly and time consuming it will be, right? So materials informatics based techniques may be applied to predict the GFA, right? If you can predict it before actual experimental trial, so you can you can save your cost and time, and this is the purpose of this particular presentation. Okay, so we are going to go for 4 steps, okay, and I'm showing you the roadmap. The very first step, what we have done is that we have compiled the metallic glasses, and when I say BMG, bulk metallic glass, if the critical thickness is 1 mm or more, it is called BMG. Now this condition is revised. It is proposed that if the critical thickness for a particular alloy, if it's 10 mm plus, then we should call it BMG. But in this particular case, when I say that I have collected 594 BMG data from the literature, experimental data from the literature, I have assumed B stands for 1 mm critical diameter. Okay, so that data we have collected. So what we can use this data for predicting further data. This is our purpose. So for one experiment we have done, we have evolved a new GFA expression, okay, and that GFA expression in TG, that is glass transition temperature, and then Tx is the crystallization temperature, and TL is the melting temperature, right? And we can experimentally determine this TSC or DTA. If you are going to melt it, the lowest temperature is TG, below which it remains glass, above which it becomes liquid. And TX is the temperature at which TX is greater than TG, okay? TX is higher than TG. So TX at which it becomes crystallized, and TL at which it is going to completely melt. So you know that we are going to capture glass forming ability of an alloy in terms of TG, TX, TL using genetic programming code. Okay, and then what we are going to do is that we are trying, you know, we cannot, you know, for modeling it is better, it is easy to deal with numbers, right? So we want to convert these BMGs in terms of numbers. So for that we are finding the generic elemental attributes which influence the glass forming ability, and we want to represent the BMG in the numbers. So how we have done it, that will be the second step. And using this, we are going for classification and feature extraction using PCA. So what is classification, what is feature extraction, what is PCA, I will explain when this in the coming slides. And after that, we have developed a predictable GF expression. And doing that, we have done validation of the expression for 5 reported ternary systems. We have seen that whatever we are predicting, it is working. And we have developed new composition using genetic algorithm by maximization function of prediction of predictable GF expression. And after doing that, we have done experimental validation. So in this 4 steps, I will finish it. So rather I should say we'll complete it. Okay, so module 1, the evolution of new GFA expression in terms of characteristic temperature, right? So in order to understand, you know, we need to understand a bit about the glass forming ability. So normally the glass forming ability of a particular alloy, it is measured in terms of RC. What is RC? RC is the slope. This is temperature time plot. Okay, and for example, this is one plot for alloy 1. This is another plot for alloy 2, right? And this is the cooling rate, means delta T. Delta T is the change in temperature divided by delta time. So that is the cooling rate, right? So for this particular alloy, you need to cool it fast. Cooling rate, high cooling rate is required. But for this alloy, even if the cooling rate is low, here it will be amorphous and here it will crystallize. Means if you are inside this nose, so it will crystallize. So this is the higher cooling rate is required. So this is not a good glass former. This is a better glass former than this. This is how we compare it. So the GFA is measured in terms of RC, right? Initially it started like this, and higher is the RC. For example, this is a higher RC. So poor is the GFA of an alloy. This is something very well established. Now, but practical experimental determination of RC is very cumbersome. You have to melt it and you have to do this cooling rate experiments you have to do, which is very cumbersome, right? So what people have started thinking in terms of critical diameter, which I just explained. So what is critical diameter? Dmax. Sometimes we see it, write it as DC or Dmax. That is the maximum diameter of a glassy rod without crystallization at the center. And now Dmax has replaced DC due to relatively convenient experimental determination. It is easy to capture Dmax rather than DRC. Okay, but you know, then there are another difficulties. However, multiple experiments are still unavoidable to determine Dmax. Right, you have to make multiple experiments to determine where you are getting Dmax. Right, but you know, easily you can experimentally determine your TG, TX, and TL using DAC and DTA, differential scanning calorimetry and differential thermal analysis. You can do it once you synthesize a metallic glass. Okay, so it is noted that there are several expressions in terms of TG, TX, and TL have been proposed to represent GFA, right? Because TG, TX, TL, it represents the metallic glass. It is irrespective of the cooling rate, right? And now the thing is that a single synthesis of BMG and characteristic temperature, means TG, TX, TL, is sufficient to estimate Dmax using such expression. But the requirement is that such expression must be very well correlated with the Dmax and must have physical significance. So what is the meaning of the physical significance? I will explain it. But the correlation should be high. First. Second is that this particular table, I am showing you the data which I have collected, and I am just showing you about 15 alloys, but I have data for 594 BMGs, which are experimentally synthesized. For example, this is a 3-component alloy, this is your 2-component alloy, and this is your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6-component alloy, right? And these are the compositions, and this is experimentally synthesized, and this is the TG value, which is less than the TX, and this is the TL, at which it is going to melt. At this temperature in kelvins, it is going to crystallize, and below this it will be glass. Okay, and this is its maximum diameter. If you form metallic glass, the composition here it will be 1 mm or so. This is the critical diameter. So, and this is the heating rate which was employed while measuring TGTXTL, and the fabrication method, this copper based, copper mold based, and different fabrication method, and these are the references. So this is how we have compiled the data. Now we are talking about the evolution of new GFA parameter. So what we are doing is that we are splitting our data in 2 sets. 410 data, we are taking it as training data for genetic programming based code. There is a genetic programming based computer code, right? And which evolves GFA expression, and 184 testing data. And there is nothing sacrosanct about this 410 and 14. We need, normally the data is split in training data and testing data. So randomly we have split our database in 2 portions. This is we call it testing data to evaluate the performance, and this is the structure. Actually, these are the 2 parents actually, and when they are going to combine together, this branch you have to cut and put it over here, and this branch you have to cut and put it over here, right? And this is how this so-called, and what this tree is showing, this is TG and TL, and there's a minus sign. So TX and TG, so TX divided by TG, well, genetically it is going to evolve. And what command we are giving it to this code is that we are looking for an expression. We are asking this code to give us an expression which should give us high correlation with the Dmax. This is what we have done. And after doing it, it is giving us this correlation, which we have finally decided that it should be taken as high GFA expression. So now we are comparing our expression, which is kept over here, with the other published expression in terms of TGTXTL. We find that the correlations, they are higher, significantly higher. We have compared on various bases. I'm not going to explain those bases, but we find that these correlations are significantly higher than all proposed correlations. So this is one example where the data-driven techniques, they are useful to solve such physical problems. First. Second thing is that what is the meaning of physical significance of this expression? For higher glass permeability, TG should be as high as possible, so that the liquid should immediately become to glass first. And second is, see, this is the TG, this is TX, and this is TL. And when the TG is high, glass permeability should be high first. And that this region should be as low as possible, because in this region there is high chance of crystallization. So always we find that TL minus TX, that is in denominator, and TG is high, and TX minus TG, this region, if so, this is the physical significance, right? We are not just maximizing the correlation, but it has physical significance also. And for I'm not reading the summary, I guess that we understand it. And for details, you can refer this published paper. Let us go to model 2. In model 2, what we are going to do, numerical representation of BMG using, right? So if I go to the next slide, okay, so we want to go make the numerical representation of BMG, okay, and do principal component analysis for classification and feature extraction. So actually we cannot deal with these alloys basically. And is there any way, to convert it in terms of numbers so that we can model it? So what we thought is that this slide, it is showing you the elemental attributes which influence GFA. And this is reported in the literature that atomic radius, it has some role with the glass permeability of alloys. Electronegativity, work function, electron density at the boundary of Wigner's cell, bulk modulus, melting point, linear expansion coefficient, heat of fusion, molar heat capacity, density, and attributes. But by doing a rough set based analysis, which I am not presenting here, we have reduced it from 18 to 11. 11 such variables were taken first. But mind it that these variables, they are the elemental attributes. They don't represent the metallic class, right? So how to represent the metallic class? So what we are doing is that we are trying to combine the composition with this generic elemental attributes, right? So what is the way? I am telling you the simplest possible way. I am writing it CIRI, and I is going to start from 1 to n. N is the number of elements. For example, if it is three component system, so it is going to vary from 1 to 3. So I am going to multiply the radius, okay, with corresponding fraction, or what do you call it, atomic fraction, right? CI stands for atomic fraction, and I'm going to sum it together, and it will give me a number. And I'm saying that this number is going to represent the radius of the alloy, right? That is my assumption, and people have already used it. In the literature, we have found that there are various ways, and we have so we are converting GF potential GFA descriptor, yes, using the composition and those generic variables, right? So we have tried such 13 variables, right? So basically, if you multiply 18 into 13, it comes out to be 250 such descriptors, right? So out of 250 such descriptors, which descriptor is significant? That was really a challenging task. So we used rough set based techniques and PCA based techniques to identify that which variables are promising. But without going into the results, explaining the results of rough set based techniques from 250, I'm just saying that let us reduce it to 11 such variables. Out of 250, we are reducing it to 11. So how to take such 11 variables? We have taken all these 11, right? Means somewhere we have discarded seven attributes which are not significantly influencing, but we could not discard this 11. So this 11 we have taken, and out of such 13 possibilities, I have just shown 6 as a representative, but we have considered 13 such possibilities. We have seen that the very first possibility that was more meaningful. The basis of why we call it more meaningful, for that we have done rough set analysis, which result I am not presenting, right? And so if you look here, that we have a table of 494 alloys which are along the rows, and there are 18 such 11 such descriptor space, right, which we have just created. So it is 594 into 11 matrix basically. And what is PCA? We are trying to visualize this this entire data in a space. That is that, yes, and wherever the variability is the largest, we are saying that that is our first principal component. Okay, so because in PCA we try to capture the variability of the data. So the largest variation, see, these points are representing the alloys. 594 alloys are plotted over here, and here along this particular axis, right, along this particular axis, the variability is maximum, and the second highest variability is along this. So here we are calling it PC1, principal component 1, and this is your principal component 2, and we are plotting it, and we that this circles, this ellipse, they are artificial basically. Artificial means it is manually done basically, right? So if you remove this ellipse rather than they are clustered, and here we have tried to identify such clusters, and I am saying that this is A, B, C, D, E, F, something like that first. And here this is the variance explained. So the point is that if we look at this particular plot, we find that if you take first two principal components, it captures about 80% variance in the data, right? It means that it suggests that if you go for, if you discard, it is basically, you should keep in mind that it is 11-dimensional data, right? And we are trying to reduce it to 2 dimension. And these plots are suggesting that if you choose only 2 principal components, you capture your 80% variability, right? So that is why we are coming to from 11-dimensional data to 2-dimensional data, and this is what we say that this principal component is helping us to classify the BMGs. So what? The point is that now we are comparing. We have identified each alloys, and these are the 7 classes already proposed by Innovate, right? And this classification is empirical classification based on the subject knowledge, and this classification is PCA based classification. Now if you compare it, you can look at this diagonal, right? For example, if in cluster A there are 62 alloys. Out of 62 alloys, 59 alloys they belong to class 1. Similarly, if you look at cluster B, this is cluster A and this is cluster B. Out of 91 alloys, all the 91 alloys belong to class 2 of Innovus classification. So there was a striking similarity. Again, D 100% similarity. Out of E, out of 27, 12 cases they are matching, right? So, and here out of 80 cases, 74 cases are matching. So we were surprised to note this resemblance between, the empirically proposed classification and classification by the PCA. So this was one success. Second is that many out of 594 cases, 33 BMGs which are experimentally synthesized, they do not fall anywhere in Innovus classification. So we had to propose new classes. And what is the fundamental meaning of this classes is that if you want to make an BMG, so you have to select one element for early transition metal, second element for late transition metal, third one either from aluminum or gallium, and fourth one from the second element, something like that. So we proposed new classification, the new classification, and it was just the byproduct of our PC analysis. Next is that again surprising result we got is that the PCA, the principal components which we have developed from the data, it showed 92% correlation with TG, 91% correlation with TX, and mind it that TG, TX, TL, these are the experimentally measured quantity, and principal components you have just developed out of your numerical scheme, and TL was also correlated to 92%, right? So again, maybe, and your PC2 was also correlated with your average radius, atomic fraction weighted sum radius, 78% correlation. So this was also surprising result for us. So in this exercise, what we have done is that we have quantified, we have converted in numbers the metallic glasses. And for details, you can refer this paper on multivariate analysis of bulk metallic glasses using principal component analysis. Right, but there is the issue. What is the problem here is that we cannot predict it. Even after we have done these two modules, we cannot do prediction of metallic GFA. So in the module 3, we want to develop predictable GFA expression in terms of principal components. So what we have done is that we are using 594 BMG data, and we are using the PC1, PC2, and we are using genetic programming based code, and we are asking the code to develop an expression, and this is the expression developed, and it is giving the correlation 0.58. So the question comes to our mind that this coefficient correlation is very poor, but the point is that we can justify it because all these metallic glasses, they are not synthesized in one lab, they are synthesized in various labs. First thing. Second thing is that they are synthesized using various routes. Means the synthesis technique is also not uniform, right? So there are various issues, right? And it is compiled. So this we assume that this is one of the best correlation known, means comparable to the best correlation. Now we check. We do not blindly believe that your PGP, which is predictable glass forming parameter, it is going to work. So what we have done is that we have taken a 3-component system, lanthanum, nickel, and magnesium based system, where the metallic glasses are formed, right? And we are plotting the PGP here. So various colors you can see here, right? And inside this plot, you can see another triangle, right? So here, I have chosen eutectic composition over here. Chosen means the eutectic of nickel and lanthanum falls over here. Eutectic of nickel and magnesium, it falls over here. And eutectic of lanthanum and magnesium, it falls over here. So if you join it, this is an artificial triangle we are deliberately putting over here. And this black dots, it is the experimental synthesis. People have already done experimental synthesis. It is not done by us, but it is reported in literature. And we find that there is a good correspondence between the high GFA predicted and the synthesized composition and this triangle, first. And second is that we have used the materials project data, and that out of this ternary system, we are just trying to find out the stable compounds and its formation energy we have picked. So please note that here, the formation energy is high, means these compounds are very stable. So they would like to crystallize basically, right? This number is very high, but this number is low. And there is a good correspondence. Here your PGP is predicting that here the glass will form, and in this region the glass forming ability predicted is very poor. So this is one particular case where we found one-to-one match. Similarly, similar matches we have found in 5 such cases, like copper aluminum lanthanum system, zirconium magnesium calcium system, and silver copper zirconium system, and copper aluminum lanthanum system. One-to-one correspondence we have noted, and due to shortage of time I am not explaining the details, but we have seen that our PGP parameter, it works fine. So the summary of your module 3 is that the predictable GFA expression has been developed. The good correspondence between predicted region of high GFA and experimental synthesis has been observed for 5 different ternary systems, and developed GFA expression may be used for prediction of high GFA composition. So, and for details you can refer this paper in intermetallics. And let us go to module 4, that we want to optimize composition for using genetic algorithm and its experimental validation. So we have developed a fitness function for compositional search, and we are saying that B predictable predicted diameter predicted in terms of PGP, it was fitted to minimize the square error. Okay, we are just doing regression, nothing else. And see here that the black points here, we are putting 594 BMJ data here, and we are comparing the predicted diameter and your experimental diameter. We find that there is correspondence, but there are several cases where there is deviation, large deviation. So we have tried to capture this deviation. See, this is the BMJ numbers, 594 cases, and here is the deviation in terms of MS. So this is the 0 line. All the lines ideally it should fall at 0, but if you check that within error of 5 plus minus 5 mm diameter, many BMJs are falling, right? And the another way here is that I have counted the cases, maybe around 400 BMJs, they fall within the range of the band of plus minus 5 mm diameter. So we assume that this fitting is good fitting, okay? And but this data we don't appreciate. Basically, when the Dmax, experimentally reported Dmax is less, the residue is also less. But when the Dmax is increasing, then the residue is also increasing. So we don't say that this is a perfect model, okay? And there is a chance that it can be further improved, but that this band, it gives us confidence that our modeling, it is on right direction, right? Next is that genetic algorithm based compositional search. We have written a computer code to calculate PGP for 38 elements, and these 38 elements, they are used for metallic glass composition till date. So that is why we are confining ourselves to the 38 elements, and we have written the code such that it can work with 8 component system. For alloy having 8 component, it can be very well accounted. Next is that this GA code, it is going to call PGP function, right? And it is going to go for selection, crossover, and mutation for the user defined parameters. And further we have reduced in the sense that we don't want to go for all 38 elements. We are again confining ourselves to the 7 low cost elements like aluminum, manganese, iron, cobalt, nickel, copper, tin, and indium. Only 7 elements we have confined because we don't want to make metallic glasses which are costly, right? And these are the typical results we are getting. And for example, this is your 3 component system, 4 component, and 5 component systems. These are the predicted compositions, and this is the calculated diameter. Calculated, I mean that this is the expected diameter of the metallic glasses, right? But we do not believe, for example, we do not rely on that. Okay, our code has given this composition, so let us experimentally validate it. We have again used a filter, that which the composition which are not proper should be removed before going to the experimental phase. So what we have done is that these are the best known compositions, okay, globally best known compositions, and best known is 72 mm palladium based, then again zirconium based, right? These compositions, and these are 72 mm to 20 mm, and we are treating this as reference composition. because we are comparing our composition with respect to this particular composition, right, which was giving 30 metallic glass, and we have done empirical analysis, and this is a typical empirical analysis of your first composition, and these are our observation which I am not reading. And but if you do it for all the 15 composition, there are common features which we have noted. And what are these common attributes? These common attributes I have noted it down: 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, and 0.8. Due to lack of time, I'm not reading these common attributes. But what we have done is that any composition which the genetic algorithm optimized composition deviating from the above attributes, right? If there is deviation, we are just simply removing them, and they are not considered. So after removal of those compositions, we are left with these 15 compositions, which are predicted from the genetic algorithm, right? So what? So now it is time to go for experimental validation. So out of 15 composition, we have further chosen 3 compositions. We don't want to increase the number, right? So we have gone for mechanical alloying, and you know that this is the composition. We have taken powders: zirconium, aluminium, silver, nickel, copper powders, and we have done mechanical alloying. So in mechanical alloying, there is a possibility of alloy formation, right? This is one of the way. We are not making the glass formation, but indirectly we are checking the amorphization potential of that composition. So when we mill it for 1 hour and do exert, these are the crystalline peaks we get. But if you mill it for 75 hours or even 100 hours, we find that there is some amount of crystallinity, the sharpness is remaining, right? But if you compare it with respect to GA predicted composition, I'm not going to explain these two XRD plots, but if we compare these two plots, we find that our aluminium nickel iron based composition, this is genetic algorithm derived composition, we find that in the first hour, if you mill it, we get this kind of XRD pattern. But even after milling of 25 hours, we get this kind of amorphous peak. So and the peak is remaining even after milling of 50 hour or 75 or 100 hours. So if we compare, here the peak sharpness is more, and here this peak sharpness, even at comparison of the 25%, 25 hours, it is becoming amorphous, right? So this is giving us a clue, that experimental clue, that we are on the right track of our modeling. So I'm not going to read the summary of module 4, and the details, publication details, we can get it here, and we can do future work here that influence of other factor other than the composition, which is influencing GFA, that may be explored further. Few other attributes influencing GFA may be included in the revised model, and high GFA reasons predicted in the PGP plots may be experimentally explored, right? That I think that work is remaining, and the design methodology may also be extended for design of other multi-component systems, right? For example, nowadays the high entropy alloy intermetallic compounds, they have become very popular. So similar approach, we can extend it for this kind of alloy design, and many other activity can be done on the similar basis. Now it is time to acknowledge one of my PhD supervisor, Professor P.P. Chattopadhyay, who is presently director of National Institute of Foundry and Force Technology, Ranchi, who introduced me to the fascinating field of metallic glasses, to the Dr. Subhash Ganguly, who was enthusiastic about modeling and computational techniques, especially artificial neural networks and fuzzy modeling kind of, and Dr. Partha Day, one of the collaborator of Dr. Subhash Ganguly, who introduced to me the fascinating area of genetic programming, which I rarely understand, but I can use it, and I can make use of it for deriving useful results for applications like metallic glasses. So thank you all for your kind patience, and I have exceeded my time limit by 5 minutes, 3 minutes, I guess. So it is time for your questions and queries and your comments. Over to Swati and the organizer.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for sharing your time in your busy schedule with us.
Thank you, Swati.
And so there are some questions in the chat box, but some are answered also.
Okay.
Means one has asked what is glass forming ability and how to check it.
Okay, so glass forming ability we had discussed. Let me remind that first we measure in terms of critical cooling rate (RC), okay, and second we measure it in terms of critical diameter, okay, and third is that sometimes we measure it in terms of GFA expressions, right? So as you correctly said that these questions are already answered. Any other questions, Swati?
So it is written here, what are the process to calculate the correction factor?
Uh, I think that I have not talked about correction factor at all. It means that I do not understand the question well.
Okay, it's simply written here, what are the process to calculate the correction factor? Maybe Mr. Naresh Khute, sir,
Yeah.
if you elaborate your question. So one question is asked from Hemant Kumar.
Yeah.
But so from your point of view, is there any material is universally and used in any system? If yes, so what are the properties it must have?
Universally used for which application, Swati?
It's not written here, sir. Just a confused question.
Okay.
It is not clearly formatted. From your point of view, is there any material is universally and used in any system? If yes, so what are the properties it must have? The question is not clear
Okay.
so much.
So I think that I have answer for this question, Swati.
Okay.
If we can find out universal material, right, then it will become end of materials engineering and material science. We
Yes.
need not to do further research. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So yes or no? So means every application is unique. So we have to tailor it, and that is our bread and butter for materials engineers, right? If such material is already discovered, then there is no further requirement of any material scientist, right? So we should stop teaching material science and materials engineering, right?
And a
And
virtual
but
material.
ideally we should look for such material, Swati, which is applicable everywhere.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, okay. So it's all the questions are answered, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Swati.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you to all the organizers once again, and I regret that I could not attend other lectures, but definitely I will see the video lectures. And again, very much thankful to the organizers for the opportunity to share my experience in the field. And furthermore, for organizing such wonderfully.
Sir, I think there is some
And
more
I learned a lot about it.
Sir, hello, Dr. Tripathi, sir.
Yes,
So your
Swati.
voice is not clearly audible. What to?
Yeah, Swati, what I said is that I'm thankful to the
Yes, sir.
organizers.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
So now it's the end of our third lecture of today's session.